You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Well, I've done this a bunch of times. It's really been great for my business, and it's a great process, too, to help you develop your subject matter knowledge to really focus things. I'm talking about writing a book, and it doesn't have to be elaborate, but what writing a book does is set you apart as an expert in your field. And obviously, you got to put some work into it, but the person you're about to hear from has streamlined the process and can make it very easy for you. Your name is Marco Salinas. The website is expertpublishing.associates. Marco, welcome to the show. Publishing a book. I hit upon a few of the benefits for you to do that, how it can help your business. Why don't you tell us a little more about the process, why it's a good idea to do it, and some success stories that you had in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Kerry. So I think that, a starting point in this conversation is what I like to call positioning. I think most business owners kind of have an understanding, at least a basic understanding of this concept of having a certain position within their market, within their niche. And what I'm referencing is the position that they take within the eyes of their prospect or their client. All of us want to hold ourselves up in a higher position in the eyes of the people who we're basically trying to hopefully get some sort of money from, right? We want these people to open their wallets and we want them to feel good about it. And usually when that person sees you in a higher status elevation, that helps a lot. It makes the process a lot smoother. It makes it a lot easier. And typically people are willing to pay more when you hold a higher positioning status. And so I usually come in with that as the starting point. Now, I think most likely there's a good amount of people that probably follow your podcast that may have already written a book. So I might be preaching to the choir in that regard, but there's always going to be those others that know the importance of this or would like to have a book, but typically the difficulty comes in with time constraints. And so we're usually out there being great doers of our product or service, and we are excellent at what we do. We're amazing plumbers, we're amazing lawyers, we're amazing chiropractors, the list goes on. But one thing I learned from my mentor a long time ago is that we're really not so much in the business of that actual practice that we are working on. We're really more so in the marketing of said practice. And so making sure that we are spending time and we are building out some type of marketing assets that allow us to inform and educate our clients and prospects is absolutely vitally important to the growth of that business. And what better of a resource to use than a book? Because everybody knows what the heck a book is, right? Books have been around since the beginning of time. We all understand the value of them. I don't know about you, Kerry, but myself, I have a very difficult time throwing books away. I'd rather give a book away before I throw it away. And so these little assets do have very, very much inherent value in the minds of just about everyone. And so it's a good strategy to use, and it has a long shelf life. And so again, typically if you create a book and you go through that process and you give it to someone, when they're done with it, they're most likely going to give it to someone else, or worst case, they'll probably put it on the bookshelf. But compare that to the number one strategy that business owners use, which is usually the business card. The business card gets thrown away. If you're lucky, somebody will at least, scan it. Now with some of our better, with the phone on your camera or the technology, the different apps that we have, but they usually do end up in the trash. They don't stand out very much. Very much a commoditized marketing resource, the business card is. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have one, but you should certainly figure out a way to, again, back to my original statement, find ways to position yourself higher and build that authority. And so a lot of this boils down to authority marketing principles. And that's what that whole positioning thing is all about. And we've done books for all different niches, everything from, like I was mentioning earlier, everything from attorney all the way to plumber, HVAC, and kind of everything in between. And so I really don't think there is a business out there that couldn't benefit from a book. I truly believe that all businesses would have some sort of a great benefit from using a book. It does work a little bit better in other niches, specifically for professional service providers. But ultimately, I think any business would benefit from this. And I do think that just about everyone would agree that having a resource like this would certainly help them to elevate their positioning status higher.
All right. So how difficult is the process here?
This process, we try to make it very easy. Again, to my point earlier, usually time constraints are the biggest obstacle to an individual getting their book done. And so what we've done is we've streamlined it, and we, step one, interview them on our podcast, Business Innovators or Business Innovators Radio. And we will ask the proper questions that, correspond to whatever their service offering is. And we're asking questions from the perspective of a curious prospect. And so these are the questions that people that are most likely going to be interested in what you're offering are going to ask. These are the things that they have in their mind that they want to know, so you can put their mind at ease. And so we ask these questions on the podcast. You give a very long-winded answer with lots of good information for each one of those questions. And then what we're going to do is, after the podcast, we're going to transcribe that information, clean it up, and edit it for readability. And then we basically are turning that into a question and answer book by using that format. So we kind of circumvent, so to speak, the process of having to sit there and write something out on the computer and spend a significant amount of time. Now, these are small books, so we're not trying to make this your next big book that you would use for something that you might see in the university. We're trying to keep it short and sweet. We live in what I call the digital attention span economy. So obviously people's time period for paying attention is getting smaller and smaller. We're in the era of TikToks and Reels and all these things, and so people's brains are just getting constantly hit with these little dopamine hits. And so you really can't come to someone with some large amount of information unless it's one of these situations where the person up front says, you know what, we're going to do a deep dive. I want to go deep on this thing. I'm trying to get as much information. I'm turning this into a big long-term project. But when you're trying to sell someone something, that's typically not what they're interested in. You usually need to have something easy to digest, and that's where the question and answer format comes in. The books are usually about 50 to 80 pages max, and several studies have been conducted that prove that books that are less than 100 pages obviously are going to have the highest likelihood of actually getting read. And so we find that the book being in that smaller page category increases the likelihood of somebody actually opening it up and at least looking at some of the information. And that's kind of in a nutshell, though, Kerry, kind of what we do as far as pumping that book out nice and quick and fast. And we're usually done in about 30 days.
Oh, that's great. Took me 4 or 5 months to write my last book about podcasting. So you really cut down the time frame dramatically, and most of the people, I assume, are very pressed for time.
Don't just survive, thrive. The Financial Survival Network.
Osino Resources is a Ross Beatty-backed gold exploration company in mining-friendly Namibia. Osino's district-scale land package is situated near 2 producing gold mines, one of which Osino's management team previously developed and sold to B2 Gold. Osino's founders and management are experienced mining professionals who have already successfully developed and sold 2 companies in the past 7 years. Osino has an excellent shareholder base with Ross Beatty owning 20%, insiders 5%, and Resource Capital Funds 8%. This is an exploration company with drills turning that you'll definitely want to pay attention to. Osino trades in New York under the ticker OSIIF and in Toronto under the ticker OSI. To learn more, go to osinoresources.com. That's osinoresources.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network, the information you need to thrive now more than ever.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think you would probably agree, Kerry, that these business owners are busy running their businesses. And if we can introduce something that allows them to get this thing done without having to set aside a significant amount of time, that it would most likely be very appealing to people in those type of circumstances.
Okay. And tell us, give us an example of the benefits of how this program works.
So I think the benefits of being able to have a book done for you so quickly, obviously, again, is of great benefit to not have to spend a ton of time on this thing. And then the second thing is the benefit of actually having the book is a big differentiator. So with my marketing background, one of the things that we spend time on is finding ways for the business to do things that stand out. And a big differentiator for a lot of industries, a good starting point is absolutely a book. And so, yes, there's a lot of books out there. When you do a search for Amazon and what have you, obviously there's a lot of different books and a lot of different subjects and a lot of different categories. But what I've done is I've kind of studied a little bit. For example, I've got a client that's in the mortgage space. And when you go and look at how many licensed mortgage originators there are, and then you go look up, books about mortgage on Amazon, just as an example, where the great majority of those types of books are located, you'll find that the actual percentage of individuals that have a book compared to the percentage of actual licensed mortgage originators is very small. So there's actually only a very small, tiny amount of them that have their own book that are within that niche. Now, that's just one niche, that's one category, but most likely if you were to look at a lot of others, you'd probably find pretty similar numbers. And so there's still a great disparity there between the amount of service professionals in any niche or any category compared to the amount that actually have a book. Again, the numbers are still very, very small. And so this presents a huge opportunity to differentiate. So that's one of the biggest factors. And one of the big things that I'm always talking about with business owners is you got to find ways to stand out. You got to find ways to differentiate. And so that's a big one in and of itself. If you're giving the book away, and that's the strategy that we recommend. So we're not trying to create the next 50 Grades of Shay. We're not trying to create the next Stephen King book here. We're not trying to write the next Hemingway. The goal here is to write this short and sweet and simple book that you can give away, and essentially in place of or in addition to your business card. Hopefully, if you're doing it right, you're also getting their contact information. So these little books, we also call them lead magnets. They're like a little prize that you can give away in exchange for the other person's contact information. Smart marketers will not just say, here's the book. Smart marketers will say, here's the book, but let me also get your information so that I can build that list up. In my opinion, there's a lot of money in the list. And so if you're able to drip on those people and stay in front of them, there's potential for you to sell them something, maybe not today, but most certainly later. But if you don't have some sort of a lead magnet out there, then you're not there. You're going to have a difficult time, I should probably say, collecting people's information because you want to give them something of value. People have caught on to this idea of, man, you just want my email so you can spam me and you can bug me and all that. But if you're giving them something of value, something that's educational, they will appreciate it and they won't mind exchanging their information for that. So you start the relationship off with something that is valuable, like a little book, and something that's educational, like a little book. And then when you follow up, they will most likely be more receptive to you and to your information coming into their inbox. So all of these things are benefits of producing a book and being able to help grow your business and differentiate.
Right. The so-called ethical bribe, as we call it in marketing, right?
Correct.
All right. So how many of these generally do you print up at a time?
Usually I found that business owners will do about 100 of them at a time. Printing costs are somewhere around $4 to $5 for each book. And you know, I'm not a CPA, but you know, my CPA has told me that there are also some tax advantages to, you know, purchasing these books as well. So I've had a few business owners that will, you know, buy 250 or 300 of them if they're going to have a function coming up where, you know, they're doing a book launch or they're going to have some sort of a mixer or, you know, that type of thing. And they know that they're going to be giving away more of the books. I also encourage business owners to do what we call a self-liquidating offer. And that's essentially a landing page that you can have the client sign up and get the book for free. And then maybe just cover the, cover the shipping on that. So that's another great strategy as well. So the actual printing costs are still, for the most part, pretty affordable. Obviously, it's not as cheap as just a regular old business card, but you're also going to get much better results by spending a little bit more on the printing of these books versus just a regular old business card that doesn't stand out and typically gets thrown away right away.
So what about the concept of the ebook? Is an ebook less effective than a printed book?
I think it's definitely gotten watered down, Kerry. I think it still has its place and it can certainly still work. I mean, I myself have opted into forms in the last 90 days and downloaded some type of an ebook or even a PDF. So I wouldn't discount it completely, that's for sure. But you could probably agree, though, that, you know, the little ebook and the ebook download has been around for a while now. And obviously anything in the digital space doesn't have all of the psychological benefits that holding on to something, you know, tangible does. So giving someone a physical book does enter into the brain in certain ways, and it does make a bigger impression because they're actually holding it and they're actually looking at it and they're actually touching it and that sort of thing. And so by all means, continue to use ebooks and things like that. Now, I myself personally, I've switched over to using something called a digital flip book. So it's kind of like where these two worlds meet somewhere in the middle. So it's a digital version of the book, but it in my opinion, it at least holds a little bit of a higher perceived value because on the page, it looks like an actual book and the pages turn and it makes the little page turn sound and those type of things. And so I like those. I think they're very professional. And I think if I'm going to send someone a digital version of something, rather than send them a PDF or, which is usually what an ebook is, I would prefer to do the digital flip book because it mimics a little bit more, like, for example, a book that you might purchase on Kindle, because they usually do kind of have those qualities with the page turning and the sound and that sort of thing. So you can still use it and it still does work, but I think marketers need to keep moving and trying to kind of stay ahead of things a little bit so that they don't get swallowed by, well, you're just another download, you're just another ebook, and I've got a million of these things and I'm not super impressed with it. So it's just good to be mindful of those type of things.
That's called a digital flip book, you said?
Correct. Yeah. If you do a Google search for digital flip book, you'll find there's plenty of service providers now where you can buy a subscription and then they'll allow you to host your book as a digital flip book, and you should be able to see an example of what that looks like and see how it presents your product a lot better.
Very cool. All right. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. People want to find you, connect with you on the web, etc. What's the best way?
Yeah, so my website, expertpublishing.associates. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Expert Publishing, and my first and last name, Marco Salinas. And I'd be happy to connect with you there.
All right, excellent. And if you've got a question for Marco, just shoot us an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. Make sure you click the link in the show notes of this interview to get to Marco's site. While you're there, just click subscribe so you get on our mailing list for a free newsletter. Marco, been a pleasure. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.